All right, guys. So this week we are continuing last week's topic, Herms. So this is part two of that series, and we'll start off with a different perspective on last week's last question. So this is coming from a breeder's perspective. Adam, can you answer a nominal question? Are feminized seeds more likely to produce plants with intersex traits than regular seeds from a breeder's perspective?
Yeah, certainly. So, hi, Carlos. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. So yeah, last week we kind of touched the surface of this subject, and I thought it was a perfect segue into this next episode was to basically re-answer the same question, but more from a breeder's perspective. So the question again was: Are feminized seeds more likely to produce plants with intersex traits than regular seeds? And my answer then and now still is no, they're not. And um, I'm going to go over why and explain exactly how exactly why. So um, the answer in short is that the past methods of producing feminized seeds involved stressing the female plant into producing male flowers and therefore getting pollen and making feminized seeds. And that's not the right way to do it. It's a way to basically do exactly that and produce those intersex traits by passing on that gene. Um, so the reason I say it's the opposite is that when we're breeding and making feminized seeds, we have the ability to test both of the parents for the near surface feminized intersex trait. So, in other words, when you're breeding with a male, you don't know if that male, it's very difficult to determine if that male is carrying near surface intersex traits. However, if you're breeding with a female, odds are you know the plant fairly well. It means, typically when we're breeding, well, not even typically, when we're breeding with females, these are from clone form. These are plants that have been tested, they've been grown before, um, and we can verify beforehand that this is not a near surface exposed trait in the genetics. So when we reverse a plant, it's a chemical process, and using basically silver ions to block the ethylene gas. That's how we create the the male flowers or the hermaphrodite flowers. That chemical process is not the same thing as the stress of rhodolization and the stress on the plant, which is what brings out or exposes the hermaphrodite trait.
So, what is your general reaction to hermaphrodites when you find them in the breeding program, and how do you deal with them? Is that process different with autoflowers than it is with photoperiod?
Yeah, I mean, it varies greatly between the two. I'll answer the first question first. So, certainly, hermaphrodites are the bane of every breeder's existence. They certainly should be, partly because of their extreme amount of stigma, and it's deserved stigma, and that it's they can be catastrophic for people. So, the ultimate answer is you never purposely grow with a strain that has near surface hermaphroditic tendencies. Um, Unfortunately, sometimes you don't find out until after the fact. But most of the time, as I was mentioned in question one, is that you've already tested these plants, you've grown with them, and if you haven't had any bad experiences, um, then that's a good thing. Or certainly, even better yet, is if you actually put them through a purposeful stress test where you basically heat the grow room up to 100 degrees for a couple of hours and kind of mess with the temperatures, and that's the ultimate kind of firewall if you really want to like kind of push your plants to the max before you decide to use them in your breeding program. Um, so yeah, the answer is how to deal with them is you eliminate that gene in any way possible. Um, Now with autoflowers, it's it's a little more real time in that um, with autoflowers you're constantly moving to the next generation. So every generation that you're making seeds with is basically a pheno hunt for the next generation. So you have to kind of keep an eye on the plants as they're growing, and if you see plants with male flowers on them, you have to eliminate them and just kill them, and then more importantly, don't let the seeds make it out into the world. So you're already basically creating the seeds in most cases, unless you're just doing a test run with no without producing seeds. So yeah, it's more in real time in that you bat a mole kind of thing. You hit it when it comes up, but um, certainly with autoflowers, they it seems to be pretty easy to kind of squeeze that trait out of them.
So, in your experience, are autoflowers more likely to show intersex traits as opposed to photoperiods?
In my experience, no. No, I haven't ran lots of old autoflowers. I hear tons of horror stories. In fact, just the other day I was talking to a distributor of ours who said that he knows a guy who knows a guy or something like that. One of those stories where some dude planted like 8 acres of autos and almost 100% of them hermed. And that's, ultimate terrible nightmare story. My experience with autos is very, very few herms. In fact, I mean, percentages in the decimals of a percentage and the 0.00, the hundredths of a percentage, that those kind of numbers. And we keep track of all that and keep the data. So and of course destroy that single plant when we do find one. So it's the problem is that I think some of the uh, more of the old school varieties of autoflowers do tend to have pretty heavy hermaph problems, and or just seeds from breeders that were either kind of rushing it and not meticulously removing the hermaphrodites, or even worse yet, purposely pollinating with them so they can get more female seeds. So, but ultimately, if I had to say, I would almost say in our program, they might even be lower odds, but certainly the same or lower.
So, in your opinion, do you think many of today's breeders are neglectful when it comes to how they deal with plants that show intersex traits?
That's a good question. And again, this is something that is somewhat of a contentious issue in the community. My answer, and of course, coming from a breeder's perspective, but my answer is no, that I don't think very many people are purposely. Certainly, I mean, I would expect no one's purposely putting herms out there. I mean, that's one of the biggest nightmares is dealing with the customer um, that's mad because they had some herms in their garden. Um, so I think there's certainly a tendency to point the finger, and I think one of the hardest things, and this kind of subject was touched a few times here in both of this episode and last one, but as a breeder, we only have so many environments to test our strains in. Certainly you can send out tester seeds to people, and if you trust them and they can actually run them through their environment, that helps with the odds. But in the end, what's creating more hermaphrodite plants in the system is probably more rushing it and not thoroughly testing than it is being neglectful. Which I suppose those kind of bleed into each other. But I think that the real underlying issue is lack of infrastructure for proper testing, and and as much as this would certainly ruffle feathers, is breeding with males, because to us that's a dangerous way to move forward, because again, you could be breeding with a male that's carrying a very, very close to the surface hermaphs trait, and it's pretty difficult to find out, or you may find out after the fact, because what happens with male Hermes is they'll start shooting female flowers like later into flower, and by then you've already pollinated everything, so then you can destroy the whole crop, or not. And so I think ultimately, I genuinely feel bad for breeders when they get blamed for Hermy issues. There's some breeders around here up in the Emerald Triangle that are outdoor breeders. They don't even have indoor. Some of these guys don't even have indoor grow rooms, so they may not being neglectful at all, in that they've produced some fabulous outdoor strains that never get Herms, and then they send them out to the community, and they end up in these little grow tents with super intense LED lights, or HID lights, and then all of a sudden the whole tent, or grow room gets Herms, and it's a blame the breeder kind of situation. Whereas there's plenty of situations where the breeder probably didn't do that on purpose, almost for sure, and possibly wasn't even neglectful in the processes in which they created those seeds.
So, as you kind of summed up, we know that this topic tends to cultivate an atmosphere of blame between breeders and growers. So, from your perspective, how do you handle customers that come to you with this issue?
Yeah, I definitely touched that subject with the breeders and growers, and it's one of those things that, I mean, our company stands by customer service. The one thing I don't ever do is blame the grower. So, the typical kind of response from people is most of the time, um, it's uh, minor issues for one thing, and it's a touchy subject. So as running a business that you're trying to keep all your customers happy, ultimately it's always just kind of the customer's always right type thing. Now, certainly, uh, in in all the cases with all of our seeds that we sell, they've been grown and tested by, at this point, hundreds of people, if not thousands, or even tens of thousands. And so you get situations where there's indoor farmers that grow 1,000, let's say they grow 1,000 bag grow plants, and they come back and they're like, yeah, I only had 2 Herms in there. It's like, cool, good job. It's on, low percentage, and they're happy with that. And then you get a guy that grows a tent full of a strain, and he's like, yeah, I had Herm issues, and uh, with the same strain, you certainly you could tell them, well, the odds for most people are, less than 1/10 of 1%, so it's your fault. But one thing I've learned in this industry is that cultivators tend to blame all their problems on everybody else, and I know because I am one. So I'm not I'm not pointing from breeders crossing some line into a cultivator realm. I'm speaking as a cultivator too, in that when you have a problem, it's easier to blame, the soil, the lights, the genetics company, the clones, and whatnot. So fortunately for us, that I come from both of those backgrounds, and so I kind of see both sides of it. And so I guess I understand, and being in the clone industry in the past, and I kind of say this all the time. I know I've told you this, Carlos, even recently, but when we were in the clone industry, it's, you're basically the fault. Every problem that grower had is basically your fault. I mean, it's almost like hilarious, because it's like, oh yeah, that guy had mold, now it's my fault. Like, we sold him clones 8 months ago, and, and they're molding, and it's our fault, So uh, you kind of get used to it, I guess. Uh, but certainly, I think is it's important for cultivators to realize that if they had a bad issue with Herms and then they continue to have that issue, then there's probably something underlying going wrong, something that they're doing wrong. And now what that is, it's hard to say, but it's important for cultivators to realize, to kind of to understand that before they really start like pointing fingers or publicly shaming or doing stuff like that, because it's certainly uh again, back to that last question, I don't think most breeders are out there flinging out herm seeds on purpose, because it's bad business. So talk to your breeder. If you have problems, talk to him. I would hope that most of them would reconcile and come to some sort of gentleman's agreement or something on that lines, to make things right.
So that's the end of this episode, and it actually brings us to the end of the year. Do you have any parting words about this crazy year, and any holiday wishes to give out?
Well, I mean, yeah, it's been a nuts year for everybody. It was our 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 whole country, had, and whole world had kind of had the year stolen from them by something microscopic. And you know, uh, I think most people adapted, and it shows what humans, what how quickly like humans can adapt. And most of us have figured out ways to continue to get by, and I know it certainly gave us time to really put our nose to the grindstone. I mean, Carlos, you do sales for us, but you even came back and really put in some hard times on the farm at a crucial time. And um, I think many people probably found some sort of silver lining, I hope. Certainly can't wait till this is over and we can get back to how normal, as people put it. But overall, it's been a good year for us in just our development, strain development, and continuing to kind of just keep moving forward with this. So we're releasing our autoflower line finally, and I'd like to do a couple episodes on autoflowers. There's certainly a lot we could talk about there, with everything from growing them, breeding, and our lineup, and commercial production, and where I really kind of see autoflowers as a huge part of the industry in the future, for particularly outdoor growers, commercially. And then of course indoor, certainly autoflowers have a place in theoretically everybody's grow room, if you got extra space in your bedroom. So um so yeah, I think that's going to be kind of a big part of our next 12 months. Will be kind of rolling out new catalogs and new autoflower catalogs, and keeping this thing rolling. We got a lot of fun photo period stuff in the works too. So got the snow cane coming out finally, um, after a big pheno hunt, and finally tracking the clones down, and from Michigan, and getting them back into production, and now finally getting close to making those. So and then of course we're releasing the glue sniffer fems, which have been in the barrel, ready for like to get going for a long time, and it's finally worked out. And yeah, our 5G, which is the GMO crossed with the whip, that's a really small release, really nice. So that's coming out too here in about a week. So on the 31st. So yeah, I appreciate everyone tuning in, and hopefully we can be a little more consistent with these podcasts and try to get them back at least bi-monthly.
Yeah, I just want to wish all of our friends and family out there a happy holidays and a happy new year. And all I have to say is stay tuned for 2021. And with that, everybody just follow us on Instagram, YouTube, and stay tuned for the next episode.